Hello, my friends around America and indeed around the world who are watching me today. We just returned from the most amazing mission to Israel, our latest miracle mission. This, I know, was really ordained, or as we might say in Yiddish, beshert, really destined, because that was the only time in which our key leaders all could make it to Israel, the first 10 days of August. What we didn't know was that this would be the time when some of Israel's sworn foes, their hateful enemies from Hamas, would take it into their heads and their foul spirits to start to shell Israel with mortars and send repeated barrages of hundreds of rockets toward Israel. So the good news was that everybody continued with us. Nobody even asked a question about whether we were going to really go on this mission in the midst of this reawakened war coming from Gaza. But we had literally complete safety throughout the 10 days and even the next week that some of us stayed for all or parts of. One rocket came over Tel Aviv, near our hotel, on the first day after we had landed at Ben Gurion and gone to Tel Aviv. That rocket exploded harmlessly over the sea before I could even make it to the shelter from my room. And one lady from our party with her son on the beach was calling to him to go to the shelter when she saw it explode harmlessly overhead. In a full 10 days of our mission to Israel, and the added week that I was there and some of our others were there for part of that, that was all we saw that would give you physical evidence that you were in a war zone. The Israelis were going about their business, working, going on vacation, taking their kids to the beach or elsewhere. And yet, of course, they were all very much aware that their sons and daughters were on the border of Gaza, and in some cases on an incursion into Gaza or flying overhead over Gaza to take out the rocket bases that were shelling Israel, barraging Israel, or to try to do something about these terrorist invasion tunnels which the Hamas and other terrorist operatives were digging from Gaza right under the south of Israel. So we knew there was a war going on, and we went there not just to study and plan actions to help Israel on Capitol Hill, which is our usual forte, but we knew we were going there to express our solidarity with the people of Israel and support for the IDF and all the Israelis. So the very first day, we went down to Barzilai Hospital in Ashkelon, which was as close as they would let us get at that moment to the war zone in Gaza. Later, we went up to Haifa, to the Navy base, the secret Navy base there, which we visited last year, and this time the commander made a special point of fitting us in between all the operational missions that he was doing before and after. And so that was excellent. We also saw Israelis all over the land, from down there in the south near Gaza, all the way up to Dan in the north, one of the headwaters of the Upper Jordan that flows into the Kinneret, the Sea of Galilee. Everywhere we went, the Lake Kinneret, the Dead Sea, Gana Shlosha, a popular hot springs vacation site for Israelis. Every place we went, there were IDF personnel on R&R or on leave, and also their families. And so we got to speak to them and express our support and to hear what they were undergoing in Gaza. So whether it was in the hospital, the Navy base, or in the rest of the land, the Israelis could not have been warmer in their expressions of thanks, of gratitude for us, and they were calling us heroes that we came when it appeared that no one else had come to the land. Well, I didn't feel we were heroes or anything special. We were doing what we believed we were intended to do, and we weren't going to do anything different than what we believed the Almighty had directed us to do. But having said that, it was the best time we could have been in Israel. Not only did everything go smoothly and well, and we saw all the traditional Christian and Jewish sites that every mission to Israel wants to see, particularly for some of our party, about a little more than a quarter of them who were their first time in Israel. But we also had these wonderful experiences of expressing our support for, in solidarity with the Israelis there throughout the land. And at the end, a special blessing for us, and I think a special opportunity for CPAC and Merkel, were the media opportunities that opened up with the Jerusalem Post, in which I had an op-ed published, and then also Israel Broadcasting Authority, IBA English News, interviewed me, and those interviews have been playing in the United States as well as in Israel. But in each case, the message that came to me was that we had to say to the U.S. Congress, senators, representatives, you need to have a special inquiry into the United Nations, and particularly into the UN Human Rights Council, which has gone out of its way once again to criticize Israel, and only Israel, in ways that are unacceptable and unfair. They've appointed people who are known in their own professional communities to be anti-Israel zealots. And so we need a full-scale inquiry, investigation by the Senate and the House into the UN Human Rights Council. And also, those of you who've been watching the news from Israel and from Gaza know that the UN Relief and Works Agency, UNRWA, surprise, surprise, they found that there were rockets being stored in their schools and facilities in Gaza. Well, of course, they knew they were there, but then they were found out and expressed surprise. And incredibly, UNRWA turned the rockets back over to the terrorists. So you can see where their hearts are. And we've been, for some time, in cooperation with our friends from Israel who are doing pioneering first-rate, on-the-ground research, we've been pointing out that UNRWA is unfair to Israel, and more than that, that it is consciously letting the young children in their schools be indoctrinated and brainwashed, really, from their earliest years to express hatred and to exercise terrorism and war against Israel through the school teachers' unions that are run by Hamas. So again, the Congress must look at UNRWA, the UN Relief and Works Agency, as well. We're going to be saying more about that in the days ahead. But I just want to add one last note. I've been watching Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel say that ISIS, or ISIL, the Islamic State in the Levant, or Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, is an imminent threat to the United States, and that we must do everything we can because this threat is coming against America. And I stopped to think, what is Hamas? Hamas really is the Islamic State in Palestine. You can look it up or ask them. They'll say, yes, that's what we are. We're the Islamic State in Palestine, as they say it. They're in Gaza. And so if the United States, through the Secretary of Defense, can express that ISIL is an imminent threat against America, how about Israel doing everything it can to oppose the self-named Islamic State in Palestine, or Hamas and its allies sworn to destroy Israel? Think about it. ISIL is more than 6,000 miles from our shores. ISP, the Islamic State in Palestine, so-called, or Hamas, is face-to-face with Israel. It's not 6,000 miles or even 600 yards. It's right up against Israel, and they are firing rockets at Israel every day as we speak. So one last point. Nobody is asking if we have collateral damage, if any civilians are being killed by our manifold airstrikes against the ISIS or ISIL forces in the desert or in the areas of the north of Iraq. And I'm not saying those issues or questions should be raised, but if you're not raising them and pointing the finger at our forces and British forces and others involved in those missions, we shouldn't be singling Israel out with all the care that Israel takes with respect to its airstrikes and its ground incursions to prevent collateral damage to civilians. Let's just be fair to Israel and treat them as what they really are, our best friend and ally. We'll talk more about this in the weeks ahead, but thank you. God bless you. Be back to you next week.